Hey everyone, welcome to another virtual program brought to you by Pamunkey Regional Library. My name's Ace and I work out at the King and Queen Branch Library, and today I'm going to be walking you through how small-scale farmers use different methods and ways to grow a good amount of tomatoes on a relatively small amount of land. Tomatoes are one of my favorite crops to grow. Simply, there's really nothing better than a summertime tomato. When the tomatoes start coming in, you really know that summer is pretty much here. Um, so the first method we're going to talk about is indeterminate varieties. So we're in a greenhouse right now, our caterpillar tunnel, and what that is pretty much just a really cheap greenhouse. This is a 14 foot by 100-foot long, so we can fit quite a bit of stuff in here. And we have tomatoes running down the center, and this is an indeterminate variety. So what that means is it's just going to keep on growing and growing until either disease or frost hits it, or bugs, or a whole slew of things. But right now they're looking pretty healthy for this time of year. It's, I think, like July 20th right now, and we got a good amount of tomatoes that we're harvesting today. But as you can see, we're using a trellising system in here, and what that allows us to do is when you're growing in a greenhouse space, this space that you're using is pretty valuable. So we just want to maximize. So we're going to grow up, and we're actually going to go over and up, which is called lowering and leaning. So if you look at the bottom of this first tomato plant, it starts right here, and what it does is it goes, and it did look like this down here a few months ago. These were planted in April time, beginning of April. So it's going up and up, and then we have our fruiting clusters here, and then here's our growing tip. So if we stretched it out completely, it's going to be about 10 foot long, and some of these tomatoes are already 10 to 15 feet. And by the end of the season, they could be as long as 20 feet, as long as disease and different things doesn't hit them. So what we also have to do when you're growing in a greenhouse space is keep tomatoes pretty pruned. So that is why you see the bottom of the plant is pretty much bare. What that allows us to do is get airflow coming in through here, which is really, really important in preventing diseases and just making sure that the tomatoes grow healthy. Another thing that a greenhouse does is keep water from splashing onto the soil, which when the soil splashes onto the leaves also promotes diseases and different bad things as well. Um, so if you look at the top of this tomato plant, this is our growing tip. So when we're pruning, we always want to protect this, and this is going to be wrapped around the string as it grows. And let me grab here's the tomahawk. So this is just a tomahawk, and what that allows us to do is let out string or tighten it. And these just attach to here, and when a tomato reaches the top, we can take it off. And what it's calling is lowering it and then leaning it. So that's just a one different method to get the most production out of tomatoes. And I'm going to show you one way that we prune them. So here's our pruning shears. These are mainly used for the branches. And if I can find a sucker here, if you want to come a little bit closer. The anatomy of a tomato, we have our branch and then the main stem. And then we have what's called suckers that grow in between the branch and the main stem. And our goal is to just keep it to the main stem, and that just allows tidiness and allows airflow and just keeps the tomato healthier. Otherwise, if we didn't trim the suckers off, it would just be an absolute mess in here, which sometimes it does when we get behind on pruning. So we have the growing tip, so we always want to protect that when we're pruning. And then we have a branch and the main stem, and here we have a sucker right here. And the sucker grows in between the armpit of the branch, which provides photosynthesis. And so what we do is just come in here and trim those off once or twice a week. And sucker is pretty much another it'll grow a whole nother tomato plant. So that's one reason that we keep them trimmed, and it also puts more energy into the fruits rather than growing new green leaves. So what we have here is our slicing variety. These are all heirloom striped German Brandywines and Cherokee purples is mainly what we have in here. And in this 100-foot section, we have about 350 tomato plants. We plant them 18 inches apart. And then when you're growing this close together, you're going to have to fertilize weekly pretty much. And we just use a rose and flowering fertilizer that's fed in through the drip tape. And another thing that greenhouses allows you to do is control the water that's being used, so we can really dial in the watering. Because if you get a big storm and you don't have a covering, then that large amount of water in a short amount of time it just makes the tomatoes kind of bust open and crack, and it just gets pretty messy. So this is our indeterminate varieties, and now we're going to go take a look at the field and check out our determinate varieties. Okay, so we just took a look at our greenhouse tomatoes, which are an indeterminate variety, and now we're standing in our field tomatoes, which is a determinate variety. These stop when they get a certain height and grow a lot bushier than indeterminate varieties, which keep growing and growing and growing. So these have a lot shorter season, but they also require a lot less labor because we don't have to keep them trimmed up like we do indeterminates. Sometimes with weather and different things, massive amounts of rain, if you're having like a big flush of tomatoes, can split all of your tomatoes. So we don't particularly want to spend a lot of labor and time on these. So what we do is just use these stakes. So we have a stake, about a 5-foot stake, hammered into the ground every 2 plants. And we can just quickly go through and trellis them. And if you look at the front, they're pretty much just sandwiched between tomato line. And you can tell we've trellised this 3 times. So there's the first time, and then the second, and then the third. So that keeps the plant off of the ground, and that allows easier harvest and allows airflow as well. Even though they're not in cover, you still want to get a nice amount of airflow, and it just makes the tomatoes' life easier and harvesting and our life easier. So what we're going to do is take a look at our trellising method. Okay, so here's a quick way to trellis a large amount of tomatoes. We have about 300-ish tomatoes out in the field. And here we have tomato twine. So that's what's in this box, about 6,000 feet of tomato twine. And then it's wrapped around a belt, and then the twine goes through a little PVC pipe and then out the end. So we attach it to the end here and just tie a knot. And then what that allows us to do is keep some tension on the string when we go through. So we're just going through and just picking the tomato plants up. These can get out of hand pretty quickly because they're a bushy variety. So all we're doing is try to just sandwich them together, keep them growing up instead of sidewards. Otherwise it'll become a mess in here real quick. And that's pretty much all we're doing. It's just a really quick way to keep the tomatoes up, because you don't want to spend a lot of labor on these tomatoes. You have some good years and bad years. It actually does look like a pretty good year for us. So we'll just like to keep these trellised and try to get as many tomatoes out as here as possible. So we'll go through a time lapse of us doing a whole row, and you can kind of get a sense of how fast we can do it. Okay, so here we have behind me kind of a failed experiment. This was our first year doing an indeterminate variety in the field. So we have our determinants right here, and this would be indeterminates. So this is what we grow in our greenhouse. But I did want to show y'all a quick kind of trellising method. This was, I found it on YouTube by Josh Satin, and it's pretty much just a green T-post, and at the top of it is a PVC pipe, and then we have conduit, metal conduit running through there. And then so every 10 feet, we're just placing, this is a 10-foot conduit, and it just goes into a T-post and another PVC, and then just sits right there. What you can do is trellis them just like you would in the greenhouse. We use our tomahawk. We didn't get to these. These were kind of our backup tomatoes, just in case things went wrong in the greenhouse. But we're having a really good year in the greenhouse, so it just wasn't worth our time really to do this. And if you look closely down here, you can just see how much of a mess it is. This is one plant right here, and these are all of the suckers that I was talking about. So if you just leave all of the suckers, if you don't prune them, it'll just become one massive mess pretty much. So I just tipped all these over and would hopefully get at least some tomatoes out of them. They're just going to kind of be crawling on the tarp next to it. Okay, so I just want to give you a quick glimpse into how we feed our tomatoes. This is a Melnor timer. It's a 4-zone timer. We just have it hooked up to 2, so one runs that way and one runs to the other 50 feet of the greenhouse. And the cool thing about this is this blue piece right here called the siphon jet. And what that does is you can put your fertilizer into a bucket, and it's got a spring at the end of it just to block any big stuff. And you can hear, because I took it out of the water, it's sucking in air right now. So what that does is suck in your fertilizer, and it goes through your drip system. So we have 2 lines of drip running down the middle of the tomatoes, and this blends it to about a 20-to-1 ratio to water to fertilizer. And this is about just a $15–20 piece. They do make more expensive ones. One is called the Dosatron. It's about $300 to $400, but this gets the job done pretty well and does exactly what we need to do. Okay, so just wanted to give you a quick glance of what the tomatoes kind of look like after they've been pruned and harvested. And you might not be able to tell too much from the video, but everything has its suckers pruned off. We pruned off the lower branches. We lowered and leaned them. You might be able to tell they're a little shorter. So we're about a week later from when we first looked at the greenhouse. And I also wanted to show you some of the tomatoes that we're harvesting. So here's our big slicers. And as you can tell, I just love heirlooms. We got these cool Cherokee purples. And heirlooms, they grow in all sorts of funky shapes sometimes. They got their own personalities. And then here's a nice, just regular Cherokee purple. These are some of my favorite, the striped Germans or marigolds. They got this nice red stripes down them, and their flesh is, I describe it as a peach flesh. It's just a really nice, solid, sweet flesh. Great for tomato sandwiches. Here's another really nice one. This is about a 1.5 pounder. And then we got our standard kind of red Marbone or Brandywines. Awesome, so I hope y'all enjoyed this tomato farm tour. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, leave a comment in the YouTube videos. You can also check out some of our other farm tour videos. We go a walk through the field, all the veggies we're growing. We also do a beehive tour, so feel free to check those out. And thanks for joining along.